Let's talk about MV3. What a testament these numbers are to his candidacy. Look at what he's done against teams with a winning record since 2023. He ranks first in the following categories: quarterback wins, passing yards per attempt, passing touchdowns versus interceptions ratio-wise, passer rating, and offensive touchdowns. Okay. He ranks first in every single one of these categories against teams with a winning record. That, to me, is exhibit A of MVP-like. What do you do? How do you fare? And how do you perform when not only the lights are brightest, and we know he's been dominant over the years in primetime, but how do you perform against the league's elite? And the answer for Lamar Jackson is he always shows up and performs against the league elites. With that said, we know it's well documented, particularly given the news cycle this week, that two of the teams that he has struggled against, albeit a small sample size, are the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And as Jonas Schaefer notes here, on top of the 1-3 record so far, with 10 turnovers and not a whole lot of success to show for it, Lamar hasn't been great against Pittsburgh. They've had his number. A 13.2% sack rate allowed. This, to me, is reflective of more so than just Lamar not being at his best, obviously. These are some of the supporting cast as well, as Jonas notes. That 13.2% sack rate allowed is the highest against any team. What about a 41.1 pressure rate allowed? That's also the third highest. So he's under duress. The offensive line should be in this conversation when Stephen A. Smith is going on and on and on and on and on about Lamar's MVP candidacy being tainted because of his lack of success against the Steelers. And the biggest statistic that should be talked about when it comes to divvying up blame accordingly and holding everybody in the Ravens organization accountable when it comes to the Lamar era struggles against the Steelers is the drop rate. An 8.9% drop rate. One game last year that ended up in a loss, Ravens pass catchers finished with 7 drops. So these are the context pieces that are missing when you hear Stephen A. and guys like him on the national level go on and on and on and pontificate about Lamar struggling against the Steelers. And that's exactly what he did. We've covered this multiple times, but it's setting me up for a nice little Dan Orlovsky clip of him just ripping Stephen A. Smith recently. But the last thing that Stephen A. did was yesterday when he hopped on First Take and claimed that Lamar's camp reached out to him about his MVP candidacy. And he was quoted for saying, "You don't need to be chirping about him being an MVP when he can't beat the damn Pittsburgh Steelers, considering what they've had at their disposal over the last few years." Again, context is key. He's only played in 4 of the 10 games. Some of them have been due to bye week preparation in both 2019 and 2023 last year. The Ravens played their regular season finale against Pittsburgh, but they had already wrapped up the number 1 seed and the bye. And so Lamar chose to rest. John Harbaugh chose to rest his guys. Some of this has been due to injury. Some of this has been due to illness. And so going back to this statistic right here, the 5th highest drop rate, that's not a Lamar Jackson knock. That's not an indictment against Lamar Jackson and what he's done or hasn't done against Pittsburgh. That's on his pass catchers. 8.9% drop rate, including 7 in one of those games last year, which resulted in a Ravens loss. That's the type of context that should be discussed. And I guarantee you, if Lamar was 2-2 versus the Steelers and not 1-3, and had a couple of those balls been caught by his receivers last year, this wouldn't even be a damn topic of conversation. but it is. And as a result, Lamar doing what he does best, clapping back playfully, very witty. Oh, as he's done in the past to Stephen A. Smith. Kevin Durant has been eating his lunch recently as well. But after Stephen A. was quoted for saying that, again, Lamar's camp reached out to him, Lamar responded in a hilarious way, as we covered earlier today on the Ravens Lunch Hour live stream inside the vault. My camp? Yeah, that's cap, he says. You want to know what's also cap? Stephen A. Smith actually saying that after Jared Goff threw 5 interceptions in a win the other night, you're telling me that he's still squarely involved in the MVP race? Please. I don't need to say that because Dan Orlovsky handled business for me on First Take with Stephen A. Smith earlier this week.
Definitely hurt Jared Goff, no question about it. But he was so exceptional leading up to last week. If he comes back and he's exceptional over another 6-game stretch as the season goes on, I think he can overcome what happened this past weekend. But 5 interceptions in one game is definitely damaging to an MVP's hope, an aspiring MVP's hopes.
That's a ridiculous thing to say. So first of all, he's so exceptional, but ridiculous? Still was so exceptional, still wasn't the MVP. It was Lamar. Okay, I love Jared Goff. No one's championed Jared Goff more. His MVP case is over. You don't throw 5 interceptions in primetime television and still be in that race, Stephen A. I think this weekend is going to go a long way in determining who's actually going to win the MVP. Think about it. Lamar, who is running away with the award right now, has a rivalry game against Pittsburgh. Massive moment for Lamar Jackson. Think about tonight. There's 2 guys that are very much so in that conversation. What happens if Jaden Daniels goes to Philly tonight and lights Philly up, who's one of the best defenses in the league, and wins? He's going to probably be in 2nd or 3rd place. Jared Goff is not going to catch that.
Philly ended up hanging on, of course, and has good control over the NFC East division, which is really just a 2-team race at this point between Washington and Philadelphia, with the Eagles, again, being in the front row seat there. But again, I got a lot of respect for Jared Goff. I'm honestly thrilled for him. I would love to see a Lions-Ravens Super Bowl. But to say that his MVP candidacy isn't sunk, over, done with after a 5-interception performance, yes, I get it. They won. But to say that that's not the case is absurd. That is the definition of goalpost moving, because had Lamar Jackson thrown 5 picks on a primetime game, in any game for that matter, but on a primetime game, the way Jared Goff did the other night, he would be crucified. Dan Orlovsky said what needed to be said. Stephen A. Smith is too unbalanced, too inconsistent with his football coverage, period. Jared Goff's MVP case and his candidacy is over. That's the reality of it. You don't get that luxury of hanging around that conversation when you turn the football over 5 times. Now, it was a tremendous second half by Detroit. And Dan Campbell's got this group lying high right now. And again, I'm thrilled for the turnaround and the resurrection that Jared Goff has had in his football career. He was hung out to dry. The Rams did not want him. And they went and got their Super Bowl, of course, with Stafford. But Jared Goff and this Dan Campbell group play with a tenacity and a grit that I think we can all appreciate as fans of the sport. But with that said, that does not take away, or that doesn't change the thought here. And that is, get stay in the when you have that kind of off night in a pivotal game when the entire world's watching. Let's keep it fair. Keep it an even playing field. Sherry hit me with a super chat earlier, and I'm just getting around to it now. What's up, Sherry? Thanks for the super chat donation. Bobby, going to try to make it to the pub you're streaming at on Sunday. Can I get a photo with you and Tilly if I can make it? I got to figure out if I'm bringing Tilly, Sherry. And if I do, the answer is absolutely yes. I would love to see you out there. And I would love to see everybody out there. Coming up on Sunday, the 17th, 2 days from now, at Michael's Cafe in Timonium, Maryland. It's my Ravens-Steelers pregame show. It goes from 11 to 12:30. Awesome brunch food, raffles, cold drinks, bunch of fun and football, and of course, an opportunity to join me in person. If you'd like to come on the show or you'd like to just watch off to the side, maybe I will bring Tilly. Why not? Michael's Cafe, Timonium, super easy and accessible for those of you who are in the Baltimore County area. And thanks, Sherry. Hope to see you out there. Well, if this one lives up to the bill, boy, there have been a lot of closely contested, low-scoring kinds of games throughout the history, particularly when it comes to recent years in this Ravens-Steelers battle. Pittsburgh leads the all-time series 32-24. In the John Harbaugh era, the Steelers also lead 18-14. In terms of all-time in the postseason, Pittsburgh leads that 3-1. And they also lead that in the John Harbaugh era 2-1. They've also won 7 of their last 8 in their head-to-head matchups with the Steelers. With the Ravens. So in a lot of ways, Baltimore not only playing to take over the AFC North division through 11 weeks and also to change the narrative and rewrite things from a Lamar Jackson perspective, but also start to kind of work on cutting away at this deficit in the all-time series. The way this thing is shaken out over the 60-plus times these two teams have played. I believe this is the 61st edition coming up on Sunday.